Now let's begin. The headlights carved through the darkness as Thomas McMillan's truck rumbled down Highway 49, Christmas music playing softly on the radio. He'd volunteered for the late shift at the Veterans Center, serving holiday dinner to those who had nowhere else to go. It was past 2 a.m. now, and the road stretched empty before him, decorated only by the occasional farmhouse light twinkling in the distance. Then he saw it, a small figure stumbling along the shoulder of the road. Thomas's military instincts kicked in immediately. He slowed the truck, his eyes narrowing as the headlights illuminated the shape more clearly. A child, barefoot, moving erratically. He slammed on the brakes and threw the truck into park, leaving the engine running as he jumped out. The December air bit at his skin, and his breath fogged in front of him. "Hey," he called out, jogging toward the figure. The child turned, and Thomas's heart stopped. Danny. His 9-year-old son stood there in nothing but thin pajamas, Spider-Man pattern now streaked with dirt and blood. His feet were torn and bleeding. His face was swollen on one side, and his lips had turned blue from the cold. The boy's eyes were vacant, distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. Jesus Christ. Thomas ripped off his jacket and wrapped it around his son, lifting him into his arms. The boy was ice cold, shivering violently. "Danny, what happened? What are you doing out here?" Danny's teeth chattered as he tried to speak. Thomas carried him quickly back to the truck, cranking the heat to maximum and wrapping his son in the emergency blanket he kept behind the seat. He grabbed his phone, ready to call 911, when Danny's small hand caught his wrist. "Don't," Danny whispered. "Son, you need a hospital. You're hypothermic, and your feet. Grandpa kicked me out." The words came out flat, mechanical. He said, I'm not his real grandson. He said I'm not even yours." Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest, something that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What?" "Grandpa Ronald." He came to the door. He was different. Mean. Danny's eyes filled with tears. "He grabbed me and dragged me outside. He kept yelling that I wasn't family. That Mom lied. That you weren't my real dad." The boy's voice cracked. "He threw me in his car and drove me out here. He told me to walk until I found my real family." The cold in Thomas's chest ignited into something white-hot. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and he had to force himself to breathe slowly, evenly. Not in front of Danny. Don't let him see the rage. "Your grandfather said this?" Thomas kept his voice level. "Ronald Silva?" Danny nodded, fresh tears streaming down his face. "He pushed me out of the car. I tried to get back in, but he drove away. I've been walking for, I don't know how long. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry if I'm not really your son." Thomas pulled his boy close, feeling the small body shaking against him. "Listen to me, Danny. You are my son. Blood or not, adopted or not, you are mine. Do you understand? Nothing changes that." "But Grandpa said." "I don't care what he said." Thomas pulled back to look his son in the eyes. "We're going to go home. We're going to get you warm and safe. And then I'm going to handle this." He drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his son. Danny fell asleep halfway home, exhausted and probably in shock. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities, trying to make sense of what had happened. Ronald Silva was April's father, Danny's grandfather. The man was 68, wealthy from his construction business, and had always been complicated. Thomas had never quite been good enough for April in Ronald's eyes. Thomas came from nothing, joined the Marines at 18, and spent 12 years serving before an IED in Afghanistan left him with a Purple Heart and a medical discharge. He'd used his GI Bill to get a business degree and now ran a successful security consulting firm. But to Ronald, he was still the grunt who'd married above his station. But this? Abandoning a child on a highway in the middle of winter? This was attempted murder. He pulled into the driveway of their modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. April's car was in the garage. She'd stayed home while Thomas did his volunteer shift. The Christmas lights he and Danny had hung together just 2 weeks ago blinked cheerfully, mocking the horror of the night. Thomas carried his sleeping son inside. April appeared at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe, her blonde hair messy from sleep. "Thomas, you're home early. Is everything?" Her eyes landed on Danny's torn pajamas, the dried blood, the emergency blanket. "Oh my God, get the first aid kit," Thomas said quietly. "And start a warm bath. Not hot. Warm. What happened? Was there an accident?" "Your father happened." April's face went pale, but she moved quickly, years as a nurse giving her the composure to act first and process later. Together, they cleaned Danny's wounds, treated the cuts on his feet, and got him into warm clothes and into bed. The boy never fully woke, his body shutting down into healing sleep. In the kitchen, Thomas told April everything Danny had said. With each word, he watched his wife's face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally, rage that matched his own. "That's insane," she said. "My father would never." But her protest died as she looked at the bloodied pajamas on the counter. "I need to call him. There has to be an explanation." "No." Thomas's voice was steel. "Not yet. Thomas, he's my father. Maybe he was confused, or sick, or he drove our son 40 miles out of town and abandoned him on a highway in the middle of the night. In December, Danny could have died." Thomas leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "What possible explanation makes that okay?" April's hands trembled as she reached for her phone anyway. She dialed, waited, then left a voicemail. "Dad, it's April. Call me back immediately. It's about Danny." She hung up and looked at Thomas. His phone's off. Or he's not answering. They sat in silence, the Christmas tree lights blinking in the living room, the remains of their holiday celebration scattered around them. Danny's unopened presents still sat under the tree. He'd been supposed to sleep over at his grandfather's house that night, a Christmas tradition. Thomas's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting news, but instead saw a group text notification. His old unit's chat. Someone had shared another photo from their last reunion, the 5 of them drinking beer and telling lies about the old days. Gordon Bonner, Matt Gregg, Travis Hickman, Kirk Hamilton, brothers in every way that mattered. Men who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. Thomas stared at the photo, an idea forming. Then he opened a new text thread. "Need you guys. Tomorrow night. My place. It's important." The responses came quickly. "Gordon, what's up, Mac? Matt, you okay, brother? Travis, name the time. Kirk, whatever you need." Thomas typed one more message. "Someone hurt Danny. I need help making it right." The replies were instantaneous. "Gordon, on my way. Matt, say the word. Travis, I'll bring supplies. Kirk, should I call the others?" Thomas set his phone down and looked at April. Her eyes were red, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her own phone. "He's texted me back," she whispered. "What did he say?" She turned the phone so he could see the screen. "That boy is a bastard and a liar. DNA doesn't lie. You made your choice, him or family. Don't contact me again." Thomas felt the last restraint inside him snap. He stood, walked to the garage, and opened his old military footlocker. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was his service pistol. Next to it, his combat knife. Documentation from his Purple Heart. Photos of his unit. And beneath it all, a leather-bound notebook. His problem-solving journal, as Gordon used to call it. Back in the day, when they'd encountered situations that required creative solutions to protect their own, Thomas had been the planner. The one who saw 3 steps ahead. The one who found ways to make the enemy destroy themselves. He pulled out the notebook and opened it to a blank page. At the top, he wrote one name, Ronald Silva. Then he started making a list. Morning came too quickly. Danny woke up screaming from a nightmare, and Thomas held him until the trembling stopped. April called in sick to work, unwilling to leave their son's side. Thomas canceled his morning meetings and sat with Danny on the couch, watching cartoons, pretending everything was normal. But his mind was elsewhere. On the phone calls he'd made from the garage at 6 a.m. On the information he'd started gathering. By noon, Gordon Bonner arrived first, his bulk filling the doorway. The man was 6'4", 260 pounds of muscle gone slightly soft with age, but still capable of bending steel with his bare hands. He'd been Thomas's sergeant back in the Marines, the man who'd pulled him out of the Humvee after the IED hit. "Where is he?" Gordon's voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of quiet that preceded violence. "Living room. Be calm. He's scared enough." Gordon nodded and followed Thomas inside. When he saw Danny curled up on the couch, the big man's face softened. "Hey there, little warrior. Remember me?" Danny managed a small smile. "Uncle Gordy." "That's right." Gordon knelt beside the couch, putting himself at eye level with the boy. "Your dad told me you had a rough night. But you're safe now, okay? Nobody's going to hurt you again. Promise. On my honor." Gordon looked up at Thomas. "Why don't you and your mom go make some hot chocolate? I'll stay here with Danny." April led Thomas to the kitchen, where Matt Gregg and Travis Hickman were already waiting, having come in through the back door. Matt was lean and wiry, a former sniper with eyes that never stopped moving. Travis was average height, but built like a brick wall, an explosives expert who now worked in demolition. "Tell us everything," Matt said. Thomas laid it out, every detail, while his friends listened in silence. When he finished, Travis spoke first. "So this old man decides the kid isn't his real grandson and dumps him on a highway to die. What's his angle? Money? Is there an inheritance?" "Ronald's loaded," April said, her voice hoarse from crying. "He built Silva Construction from nothing. Worth about $8 million, last I heard." "Who inherits?" Matt asked. "Me. I'm an only child. My mom died 5 years ago from cancer." April wrapped her arms around herself. "After she died, Dad changed. Got bitter. Started dating younger women. Last year he married one, Laverne. She's 35. Thomas felt pieces clicking into place. "Laverne Hubbard. Silva now," April confirmed. "Why?" "Because Danny mentioned that Grandpa was different when he came to the door. What if he wasn't alone?" Matt pulled out his phone. "Give me her full name, and I'll run her." "Laverne Hubbard Silva. Used to work as a paralegal before she married Dad." While Matt disappeared into the other room to make calls, Travis leaned back in his chair. "So we're thinking the trophy wife convinced the old man that his grandson isn't really his, which means his daughter isn't really his either, or that his daughter's husband isn't the father. Either way, she's trying to cut your family out of the inheritance." "That's my theory," Thomas said. "But it doesn't explain the DNA comment." Ronald said DNA doesn't lie. "Then someone provided him with DNA results," Kirk Hamilton said from the doorway. Nobody had heard him come in, which was typical for Kirk. The man had been their unit's intelligence specialist, able to move like a ghost and gather information like a magpie collected shiny objects. "The question is, were they real or fake? Can you fake DNA results?" April asked. "Easily," Kirk said, "especially if you have money and know the right people. Or if you bribe the right lab tech." Thomas felt the rage building again, but this time it was cold, calculated. "We need proof. We need to know exactly what Ronald thinks he knows, and where he got that information." "Leave that to me," Kirk said. "Give me 48 hours. I'll have his phone records, emails, financial transactions, everything." "That's illegal," April said weakly. "So is attempted murder of a child," Kirk replied. "Which law would you like us to follow?" April looked at Thomas, then at the other men. These weren't criminals. They were heroes, decorated soldiers who'd served their country with honor. But they were also men who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and learned that sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty. "Do it," she said. Matt returned, his expression grim. "Ran Laverne through my contacts at the department. She's got a history. 2 DUIs, 1 arrest for fraud that was dropped, and 3 previous marriages. All to older men with money. All dead now." "Dead how?" Thomas asked. "First husband, heart attack. Second, fell down the stairs. Third, car accident." Matt spread his hands. "Nothing provable, but the pattern's interesting." "She's a black widow," Travis said. "Classic. And Ronald's her 4th victim," Thomas finished. "She marries them, isolates them from their families, waits for them to die or changes the will, then cashes in. But April's the heir, not her. So she needed to eliminate the competition. By convincing Ronald that April isn't his real daughter?" Gordon said, joining them from the living room. "That seems extreme." "Not if she has evidence," Kirk said. "Or what appears to be evidence. A DNA test showing that Ronald isn't April's biological father would certainly make him question everything. Especially if Laverne's been working on him for a year, planting seeds of doubt." April's face went white. "You think my mother had an affair? That Ronald isn't my biological father." "I think someone wants Ronald to believe that," Thomas said carefully. "Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. What matters is what he believes." "There's one way to find out," Kirk said. "We run our own DNA test. April and Ronald. But we need a sample from him." "I can get that," Travis said. "I need to visit the old man anyway. Return something he forgot." He cracked his knuckles. "Like his humanity." "No," Thomas said firmly. "Not yet. We do this smart. We gather evidence, we build a case, and then we move. I want to know everything. Who Laverne really is, what she's planning, how she got to Ronald, all of it. And then," Matt asked. Thomas met his friend's eyes. "Then we destroy her." and we make Ronald face what he's done. I'm in, Gordon said immediately. Me too, Travis agreed. Obviously, Kirk added. Matt nodded. We're with you, brother. All the way. April looked at the 5 men, these warriors who'd come without question to help her family. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. Family takes care of family, Gordon said simply. And your family, April. Which means Danny's family. Which means anyone who hurts him has a problem with all of us. Thomas felt something settle in his chest. Not the rage, though that still burned hot. But purpose. Direction. He'd spent 12 years in the Marines learning how to plan operations, how to neutralize threats, how to protect his own. This was just another mission. Except this time, it was personal. Kirk, I need everything on Laverne Silva by tomorrow night. Financial records, phone logs, travel history, associates, everything. Done. Matt, I need you to find out if there's a legitimate DNA test, and if so, which lab ran it. If it's fake, I need to know how she did it. On it. Travis, I need surveillance on Ronald's house. Who comes and goes, what they do, when Laverne leaves him alone. I'll set up cameras tonight. Gordon, I need you to reach out to our old contacts. Anyone who might have intel on professional gold diggers, inheritance fraud, anything like that. Consider it done. Thomas turned to his wife. And April, I need you to think. Really think. Is there any possibility that Ronald isn't your biological father? April closed her eyes, and Thomas saw her mentally reviewing her childhood, looking for clues. Finally, she shook her head. My parents were solid. They met in college, married at 22, had me at 25. I've seen their wedding photos, their anniversary celebrations. My mom was devoted to my dad. She opened her eyes. But if Laverne found some way to fake evidence, my father would believe it. He's gotten paranoid since Mom died. Suspicious. He accused me of trying to steal from him last year when I borrowed his truck. Isolation and paranoia, Kirk said. Classic manipulation tactics. She's been conditioning him. Then we decondition him, Thomas said. We show him the truth. And we make sure Laverne pays for what she's done. The men dispersed, each to their assigned tasks. Thomas stood at the window, watching them leave, feeling the old familiar sensation of pre-mission focus settling over him. This was different from war. There were no rules of engagement here, no Geneva Convention, no oversight. Just a father protecting his son. And God help anyone who got in his way. Kirk Hamilton sat in his car 2 blocks from Ronald Silva's mansion, laptop open, fingers dancing across the keyboard. He'd been at this for 6 hours, and the picture he was building was uglier by the minute. Laverne Hubbard, now Silva, was a professional. Not just a gold digger, but a carefully trained predator. Her real name was Laverne Hubbard McGrath, and she had a sister, Marcia McGrath, who worked as a private investigator and, based on Kirk's digging, specialized in corporate espionage. The 2 sisters had been working together for years. Marcia would identify wealthy, vulnerable targets. Laverne would move in, seduce them, and marry them. Then they'd systematically drain the assets while Marcia handled the technical side, falsifying documents, bribing officials, creating paper trails that justified their theft. Ronald Silva was their biggest score yet. Kirk scrolled through financial records he definitely shouldn't have access to. Over the past year, Ronald had moved nearly $2 million into accounts that Laverne controlled. He'd changed his will, putting Laverne as primary beneficiary with a clause that specifically excluded April due to questions of paternity. But the real gold mine was the emails. Kirk had broken into Laverne's personal account, child's play for someone with his skill set, and found a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. An email to her sister from 6 months ago. The old fool is softening. Need to move faster on phase 2. The daughter is suspicious. A response from Marcia. DNA results will be ready next week. Lab tech cost me $15,000, but he's solid. Report will show 0% match between Ronald and April. I've backdated it to look like it was done 6 months after April's birth. Another email from 2 months ago started telling R about his wife's affair in college. He's eating it up. Showed him photos I had doctored. His wife with some random guy from her yearbook. He's devastated. Time to introduce the evidence. Kirk sat back, disgusted. These women had systematically destroyed a family, manipulated an elderly man, and nearly killed a child, all for money. He downloaded everything, encrypted it, and sent copies to Thomas, Matt, Travis, and Gordon. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call to a contact from his NSA days. "Jimmy, it's Kirk. I need a favor. How fast can you verify if a DNA test is legitimate or fraudulent?" 3 hours later, he had his answer. The DNA test was fake. Not just fake, but laughably so to anyone who knew what to look for. The lab it supposedly came from didn't exist. The signature on the report belonged to a doctor who'd had his license revoked 3 years ago for falsifying medical records. Kirk compiled everything into a detailed report and drove to Thomas's house. It was past midnight, but lights were still on. Thomas answered the door immediately, as if he'd been waiting. "Tell me you found something," Thomas said. "I found everything." Kirk handed over a USB drive. "The DNA test is fake. Laverne and her sister Marcia have been running a con on your father-in-law for over a year. They've already stolen $2 million and were positioning to get everything when Ronald died." Thomas plugged the drive into his laptop and started reading. Kirk watched his friend's face harden as he absorbed the information. The emails, the financial transfers, the history of the sisters' previous schemes. "They killed those other men," Thomas said quietly. "Didn't they? Can't prove it. But yeah, probably. They were very careful. Not careful enough." Thomas looked up. "They made one mistake." "What's that?" "They hurt my son." Kirk nodded slowly. "So what's the play? We give Ronald the truth. All of it. We show him what these women have done, how they've manipulated him, how they tried to murder his grandson." Thomas's voice was ice. "And then we let him decide what to do with that information. And if he doesn't believe us, then we make him believe. One way or another." Thomas closed the laptop. "How soon can we move?" Matt traced the fake lab to a guy named Hugo Doherty. He's a former lab tech who lost his license and now makes fake documents for cash. He's scared and willing to testify if we offer him protection from the sisters. "Good. What about Travis?" "He's got full surveillance on the house. Laverne leaves every Tuesday and Thursday for spa days, but really meets with her sister at a warehouse they own on the south side. They're planning something big." He heard them mention Christmas specifically. Thomas frowned. "Christmas was yesterday." "Yeah, but they were talking about next steps after Christmas. Something about a Christmas present for Ronald. I think they were planning to have him change the will and then dispose of him. They were going to kill him. That's my read." Thomas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, 2 women were planning murder. And somewhere else, an old man sat alone in his mansion, poisoned by lies, believing his daughter had betrayed him and his grandson was an imposter. "Get everyone here tomorrow night," Thomas said. "We're going to need a plan. A good one. Because we're not just taking down Laverne and Marcia. We're going to make sure everyone knows what they did. The police, the DA, the media, everyone. You want them exposed? I want them buried." Thomas turned back to Kirk. "These women have destroyed families, stolen millions, possibly committed murder, and tried to kill my son. I'm not content with just stopping them. I want them to lose everything, just like they made their victims lose everything." Kirk smiled grimly. "Now you're talking. I'll make the calls." After Kirk left, Thomas sat in the darkness of his living room, the only light coming from the Christmas tree. Upstairs, Danny was finally sleeping peacefully, April curled protectively around him. His family. His real family. Bound not by blood but by love, by choice, by years of shared joy and sorrow. Blood didn't make you family. Thomas knew that better than anyone. He'd been raised in foster care, bouncing from home to home until he aged out at 18 and joined the Marines. His real family was the men who'd served beside him, who'd bled with him, who'd saved his life and whose lives he'd saved in return. His real family was April, who'd seen past the broken soldier to the man underneath. His real family was Danny, the little boy who'd wrapped his tiny fingers around Thomas's thumb the day he was born and never let go. And someone had tried to take that away from him. Ronald Silva thought DNA mattered more than love. The old man had been manipulated into believing lies, but he'd also chosen to believe them. He'd chosen to throw away his grandson rather than question the source of his information. He'd chosen cruelty over compassion, suspicion over trust. That choice had nearly killed Danny. Thomas pulled out his phone and opened the group chat. "Tomorrow night, 1900 hours. We finalize the plan. And then we go to war." The responses came quickly, as he knew they would. These were his brothers. And together, they were going to burn Laverne Silva's world to the ground. The next evening, Thomas's garage had been transformed into a makeshift operations center. Travis had brought in a portable whiteboard. Kirk had set up multiple laptops with encrypted connections. Matt had printed surveillance photos and pinned them to a corkboard. Gordon had brought beer and sandwiches, because no military operation happened on an empty stomach. April had put Danny to bed early, exhausted from another day of nightmares and tears, and now stood with the 5 men, ready to hear the plan. All right, Thomas began, standing at the whiteboard. This is a 3-phase operation. Phase 1, we gather irrefutable evidence. Phase 2, we expose Laverne and Marcia. Phase 3, we make sure Ronald understands exactly what he's done and faces the consequences. He drew 3 columns on the board and started filling them in. Phase 1 is already mostly complete, thanks to Kirk. We have the emails, the financial records, the fake DNA test. But we need more. We need something that will stand up in court and convince Ronald beyond any doubt. I've got the lab tech, Matt said. Hugo Diarty. He's ready to testify that Marcia paid him 15 grand to create a fake DNA report. He's also got copies of texts and emails from her, detailing exactly what she wanted the report to say. Good. What about the money trail? Traceable, Kirk confirmed. Every dollar Ronald moved into accounts Laverne controlled can be documented. I've also found 2 offshore accounts in the Caymans that hold another $1.5 million. Those are joint accounts between Laverne and Marcia. Can we freeze them? Not legally, but I can make the banks aware that they're proceeds from fraud. That'll lock things up while they investigate. Travis raised his hand. I've got something on the warehouse they use. It's registered to an LLC that both sisters co-own. I planted bugs inside. They're meeting there tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. to discuss finalizing the Ronald situation. Define finalizing, April said, her voice tight. Travis pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Laverne's voice came through clearly. Ronald's getting suspicious again. He asked me yesterday why April hadn't called. I told him she was probably busy poisoning the bastard kid against him, but I don't think he fully bought it. We need to move up the timeline. Marcia's voice responded. The pills are ready. If we start giving him the right dose, he'll be dead in 2 weeks. Heart attack, natural causes. With the will already changed, you'll get everything. We'll split it like planned, and that bitch April gets nothing. What about the kid? What about him? Ronald already got rid of him. If he somehow survived, that's April's problem. The audio clicked off. April's face was pale, her hands clenched into fists. They're going to kill my father, she whispered. They were going to poison him. Not anymore, Thomas said firmly. Because we're going to stop them. Tomorrow afternoon, while they're at that warehouse meeting, we're going to pay Ronald a visit. And tell him what? Gordon asked. The truth. Better. We're going to show him. Kirk, can you set up a live feed from the warehouse bugs? Already done. I can stream it to any device. Perfect. So here's the play. Thomas sketched it out on the board as he talked. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., while Laverne and Marcia are at the warehouse discussing how to murder Ronald, April and I will go to his house. We'll bring a laptop with the live audio feed. We'll let him hear his wife and her sister planning his death. He might not believe it, April said. What if he thinks it's fake? Then we show him everything else. The emails, the financial records, the testimony from the lab tech, all of it. Thomas looked at his wife. But I think once he hears them talking about killing him, he'll be ready to listen. What if Laverne comes home early? Matt asked. She won't. Travis has eyes on the house. If she moves, we'll know. Thomas turned to Travis. You'll be our early warning system. Gordon and Matt, you'll be backup in case things go sideways. Kirk, you'll be running tech from here, monitoring all feeds and communications. What about the police? April asked. Shouldn't we just turn over the evidence and let them handle it? We will, but not yet. Thomas's voice was hard. First, Ronald needs to understand what he's done. He needs to face the fact that he nearly killed his grandson because he believed lies. He needs to feel that, and he needs to hear it from his daughter, not from cops. April nodded slowly. I want him to suffer. He will, Thomas promised. But we're also giving him a chance to make it right. To help us take down the women who did this to him. To apologize to you and Danny. To try to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. And if he doesn't take that chance, then we turn everything over to the DA and let the justice system handle him too. Attempted murder of a child is a serious charge, even if he was manipulated into doing it. The room fell silent, as everyone absorbed the plan. Finally, Gordon spoke. What about after? After we expose these women and deal with Ronald? What happens to Danny? Danny gets justice, Thomas said quietly. He gets to know that the people who hurt him paid for it. And he gets to grow up knowing that his family, his real family, protected him. Damn right, Travis said. Matt nodded. When do we tell the cops? Phase 2, Thomas said. After we confront Ronald. We'll record everything. His reaction, his confession, all of it. Then we take that plus all the evidence Kirk gathered, and we go to the DA. We don't just want Laverne and Marcia arrested. We want them convicted, publicly humiliated, and sent away for a long time. I can help with the public humiliation part, Kirk said with a dark smile. I've got contacts at several media outlets. Once the arrests happen, this story will be everywhere. Gold-digging sisters poison elderly man, attempt to murder child. It'll destroy them. Good. Thomas capped the marker and stepped back from the board. Everyone clear on their roles. A chorus of affirmatives filled the garage. Then we move tomorrow. Get some rest tonight. This time tomorrow, Laverne and Marcia Silva are going to learn that they picked the wrong family to fuck with. As the meeting broke up, April pulled Thomas aside. Are you sure about this? About confronting my father? No, Thomas admitted. But I know that if we don't, he'll never truly understand what he did. And he'll never be able to make it right with Danny. What if Danny doesn't want to see him again? That's Danny's choice. We'll never force him. But your father deserves to know the truth, and Danny deserves to have the option to forgive, if he chooses to. April leaned her head against Thomas's shoulder. I used to worship my dad. He was my hero. The strongest, smartest man I knew. And now he's human, Thomas said gently. He made mistakes. Bad ones. But we're going to give him a chance to fix them. That's more than Laverne would have given him. They stood together in the quiet garage, the plans laid out on the whiteboard behind them. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, revelation, and hopefully justice. But tonight, they had each other. And that would be enough. The next day dragged with agonizing slowness. Thomas went through the motions of a normal morning, making breakfast, checking on Danny, reviewing emails for work, while his mind ran through the plan over and over, looking for flaws. At noon, April fed Danny lunch and settled him in front of a movie. The boy was still withdrawn, speaking little, startling at loud noises. Thomas knew that trauma didn't heal quickly, but seeing his son flinch broke his heart. At 1:45 p.m., Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from Travis. Laverne's car just left the property, heading toward the warehouse. You're clear. Thomas showed the message to April. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and nodded. Let's do this. They drove to Ronald's house in silence. The Silva mansion sat on 5 acres of prime real estate, a monument to Ronald's success. Thomas had always found it excessive. 8 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a pool, a tennis court, all for one man. But Ronald had insisted on showing off his wealth. Now that wealth had made him a target. They parked in the circular driveway. April used her key. Ronald had never bothered to take it back, and they entered through the front door. The house felt empty, sterile. Christmas decorations were scattered around, but they looked half-hearted, like someone had gone through the motions without caring. Thomas spotted a photo on the mantle, Ronald and Laverne on their wedding day. Next to it should have been a photo of April, but that space was conspicuously empty. Dad, April called out. It's April. I need to talk to you. Footsteps from upstairs, heavy and slow. Ronald Silva appeared at the top of the staircase, and Thomas felt a jolt of shock. The man had aged years in the months since Thomas had last seen him. Ronald's hair was completely white now, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken. He looked like a man dying from the inside out. Which, if Travis's intel was right, he was. What are you doing here? Ronald's voice was hoarse, suspicious. I told you not to contact me. I know what you told me, Dad. But we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice when you married that man and passed off another man's bastard as my grandson. April flinched but held her ground. Danny is your grandson. The DNA test you saw was fake. That's impossible. Laverne showed me. Laverne lied to you. April pulled out the laptop and set it on the hallway table. I'm going to prove it. But first, I need you to listen to something. Ronald descended the stairs slowly, his hand gripping the railing. Thomas noted the tremor in the old man's fingers, the slight drag to his left foot. Poison symptoms, if Travis's medical contacts were right. I don't want to hear your excuses, Ronald said. It's not my voice, April said quietly. It's your wife's. She opened the laptop and pulled up the live audio feed from the warehouse. Kirk had synced it perfectly. Laverne and Marcia's voices came through crystal clear. Told you, we can't wait any longer. Ronald's been asking questions. Then give him more pills. Double the dose if you have to. Marcia, that could kill him too fast. We need it to look natural. Natural doesn't matter if he changes his will back. You said he was getting suspicious about April. What if he decides to call her, to verify the DNA test himself? He won't. I've got him too twisted up. He thinks April betrayed him, that his wife cheated on him decades ago. He's isolated, paranoid. Perfect. And the kid? What about him? He's probably dead by now anyway. If Ronald didn't finish the job, hypothermia did. Laughter. Cold, calculating laughter. Ronald had gone deathly pale. He reached for a chair and sank into it, his eyes fixed on the laptop in horror. That's not. He stammered. It's Laverne, April said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. Your wife. Talking to her sister about how they're poisoning you and how they left your grandson to die on the highway. No, she wouldn't. Dad. April knelt in front of her father, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm going to show you something else, and I need you to really look at it. Really see it. She pulled up the file Kirk had prepared. First, the fake DNA test, with annotations showing every forgery, every inconsistency. Then the real test results from the legitimate lab, showing a 99.97% probability that Ronald Silva was April Silva McMillan's biological father. Then the emails, the financial records, the testimony from Hugo Diarty, the history of Laverne's previous marriages, each ending with a dead husband and a fat inheritance. With each piece of evidence, Ronald sank deeper into his chair. His face cycled through denial, disbelief, and finally, crushing realization. Oh God, he whispered. Oh God, what have I done? You tried to kill my son, Thomas said, speaking for the first time. His voice was level, controlled, but underneath it ran a current of barely restrained rage. You drove Danny 40 miles out of town and left him on the highway in the middle of the night, in December, in his pajamas. He walked for hours. His feet were cut to ribbons. He was hypothermic. Another hour, and he would have been dead. Ronald's hands began to shake. I thought. She said he wasn't really. He's 9 years old. April's control finally broke, tears streaming down her face. He's your grandson. He loves you. And you threw him away like garbage because some woman you've known for a year told you to. I'm sorry, Ronald whispered. April, I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. Laverne, she kept saying things, showing me evidence. I thought you'd lied to me. You thought your daughter, who you've known for 41 years, would deceive you. Thomas cut in. But you trusted a woman you met at a casino. A woman who's been slowly poisoning you for the past 6 months. Ronald's head snapped up. Poisoning. The tremor in your hands. The confusion? The memory problems you've probably been having. Thomas gestured to the old man's haggard appearance. That's not age, Ronald. That's poison. Laverne's been giving you small doses of something, probably in your coffee or medication, to weaken you. In another 2 weeks, you'd have had a heart attack, and she'd have inherited everything. Ronald stood abruptly, stumbled, caught himself on the table. Where is she? At a warehouse, planning your murder with her sister, April said. She turned the laptop so Ronald could see the surveillance feed. There were Laverne and Marcia, sitting at a table, discussing dosages and timelines like they were planning a dinner party. Ronald stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he turned and vomited into a nearby plant. When he finally straightened, his face was gray, but his eyes were clear. Clearer than they'd been in months, Thomas realized. Whatever fog had been clouding Ronald's judgment was lifting. What do I do? Ronald asked. How do I fix this? You can't, Thomas said bluntly. You tried to murder a child. My child. Your grandson. There's no fixing that. Thomas, April started. No. Thomas stepped forward, getting into Ronald's space. The old man was still taller, but he seemed to shrink under Thomas's gaze. You don't get to just apologize and have everything go back to normal. Danny's terrified. He has nightmares. He won't go outside. He flinches when I raise my voice. You did that to him. I know, Ronald said, tears now running down his weathered face. I know what I did, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. How? However you want. Ronald looked at April, then back to Thomas. I'll turn myself in. I'll testify against Laverne and Marcia. I'll sign over every penny I have to make sure Danny is taken care of. Whatever it takes. Thomas studied the old man, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all he saw was genuine horror and remorse. Ronald Silva had been played, certainly. He'd been poisoned and manipulated. But he'd also made choices. Bad choices. Here's what's going to happen, Thomas said finally. You're going to help us take down Laverne and Marcia. You're going to testify, provide evidence, do whatever the DA needs. And when they're convicted, you're going to face charges for what you did to Danny. Thomas, he was manipulated, April protested. He still did it, Thomas said firmly. Actions have consequences. Even when you're manipulated, even when you're poisoned, you're still responsible for what you do. Ronald nodded slowly. You're right. I'll face whatever punishment comes. But, Thomas continued, we're not going to Danny with this yet. He's too scared, too hurt. When he's ready, if he's ever ready, we'll give him the choice of whether to see you again. You don't push, you don't call, you don't show up uninvited. You wait. Understand? Yes. And the money you offered? Danny's college fund will be fully funded. For years, full ride, wherever he wants to go. That's non-negotiable. Done. One more thing. Thomas leaned in close. If you ever do anything to hurt my son again, manipulation or not, I will end you. Not arrest you, not sue you. End you. Are we clear? Ronald met his eyes and saw the absolute truth there. This was not a man making empty threats. This was a soldier, a father, a man who had ended enemies in combat and would not hesitate to do so again to protect his family. Crystal clear, Ronald whispered. Good. Thomas stepped back. Now, let's talk about how we're going to make sure Laverne and Marcia never hurt anyone again. They spent the next hour planning. Ronald revealed that Laverne kept detailed records of all her schemes. Insurance, he supposed, in case Marcia ever tried to double-cross her. Those records were in a safe in the master bedroom. I can open it, Ronald said. I'll get everything. While Ronald was upstairs, Thomas received a text from Travis. They're wrapping up. Leaving the warehouse in 15 minutes. We need to move, Thomas told April. Ronald returned with a thick manila folder and a shoebox. Inside were ledgers, notebooks, USB drives, and even what appeared to be burner phones. She documented everything, Ronald said, his voice hollow. Every husband, every scheme, every dollar stolen. I think she and Marcia were planning to write a book someday, teach other women how to do it. Thomas flipped through the ledgers, his stomach churning. 3 men dead, maybe 4. Families destroyed. Millions stolen. And Laverne had written it all down like she was proud of it. This is more than enough, he said. Kirk, you getting this? Kirk's voice came through Thomas's earpiece. Every word. I've been recording. And I just got confirmation from my contact at the DA's office. They're very interested in what we have. Tell them we'll be there in an hour. They left Ronald's house with the evidence, instructing him to act normal when Laverne returned. Pretend nothing had happened. They'd need him to wear a wire tomorrow when confronting Laverne directly, to get her confession on tape. As they drove away, April turned to Thomas. Do you think he'll really follow through? Yes, Thomas said. He's scared. And more than that, I think he's genuinely horrified by what he's done. That might not be enough to forgive him, but it's enough to work with. At the DA's office, they met with Assistant District Attorney Jeremiah Kemp, a no-nonsense prosecutor with a reputation for taking down white-collar criminals. Kirk had already sent him previews of the evidence, and Kemp was salivating. This is incredible, Kemp said, spreading the documents across his desk. We can get them on fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder of Ronald Silva, and, he looked at Thomas and April, attempted murder of your son. When can you move? Thomas asked. I need 48 hours to build an airtight case. But if what you've told me about the poison is true, we need to get Ronald Silva to a hospital immediately for a tox screen. That's physical evidence. Thomas nodded. We'll make it happen. And I need everything. The recordings, the financial documents, testimony from your lab tech, all of it. Can you provide that? Kirk, Thomas said. Kirk, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner with his laptop, looked up. Already done. I've uploaded everything to a secure server that's accessible only by you and your team. Fully encrypted, completely legal to use in court. Kemp blinked. Who are you? Someone who's very good at finding information. Kirk said with a slight smile. Over the next 2 hours, they gave their full statements. Thomas detailed finding Danny on the highway. April explained the family dynamics and Laverne's gradual isolation of her father. Kirk presented his digital forensics. Untraceable, he assured them, at least back to him. Finally, Kemp leaned back in his chair. Okay, here's how this is going to work. Tomorrow morning, I'm getting warrants for Laverne and Marcia Silva. We'll arrest them simultaneously, Laverne at home, Marcia at the warehouse. Ronald will need to cooperate fully, which means testifying against his wife. He will, April said. And as for Ronald himself, Kemp hesitated. Look, what he did to your son was reprehensible. But if he was being actively poisoned and manipulated, a good defense attorney might argue diminished capacity. I don't want him to skate, Thomas said firmly. He won't. Best case scenario, he pleads to reckless endangerment, gets probation, community service, and a restraining order keeping him away from your son. Worst case, he goes to trial for attempted murder and faces serious time. Kemp met Thomas's eyes. But I'll be honest with you, Mr. McMillan. Juries are sympathetic to elderly victims of manipulation. If he was poisoned, confused, and actively deceived with falsified DNA evidence, it's going to be hard to get a conviction for the maximum sentence. Thomas felt his jaw tighten, but April put a hand on his arm. Let the justice system do its job, she said quietly. We got what we came for, Laverne and Marcia will pay. And Dad will have to live with what he did, whether or not he goes to prison. Thomas nodded reluctantly. She was right. The real monsters here were the sisters who'd orchestrated everything. Ronald was a victim too, even if he'd also victimized Danny in the process. All right, Thomas said. When do we move? Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Coordinated raids. I'll have SWAT on standby in case either of them runs. Kemp stood and offered his hand. Thank you for bringing this to us. Cases like this, they're rare and they're hard to prove. You've handed us everything we need on a silver platter. Just make sure they go away for a long time, Thomas said. Oh, they will. If even half of what's in these ledgers is true, Laverne and Marcia are looking at 20 to life. Each. As they left the DA's office, Thomas felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Phase 2 was in motion. Tomorrow, Laverne and Marcia would face justice. But Phase 3, that was still to come. Ronald would have to face Danny eventually. And Thomas would have to figure out how to help his son heal from the trauma of that night. One battle at a time, he reminded himself. First, they had to win the war. The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn. He couldn't sleep, his mind running through scenarios, contingencies, possibilities. What if Laverne ran? What if Marcia had a backup plan? What if the arrests went wrong? At 5:45 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Kemp. Teams in position. Moving in 15 minutes. Thomas forwarded the message to his group chat. Gordon, Matt, Travis, and Kirk all sent back confirmations. They were watching, waiting, ready to back up law enforcement if needed. At 6 a.m., Thomas's phone rang. Kemp's voice was tight with controlled excitement. We've got them. Both of them. Laverne was in bed when SWAT breached. Marcia tried to run out the back of the warehouse, but we had it surrounded. They're in custody. Thomas closed his eyes, feeling a wave of relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The real work starts now, making sure these arrests stick. Kemp paused. Ronald came through, by the way. He's at the hospital getting a tox screen, and his blood work already shows elevated levels of arsenic. Small doses over time, exactly like you said. That's attempted murder, right there. Good. We'll be in touch. The arraignment is scheduled for Monday. You and your family are welcome to attend. Thomas hung up and turned to find April standing in the doorway, her face anxious. They got them, he said. April's knees went weak, and she grabbed the doorframe. Oh, thank God. Danny appeared behind her, small and rumpled in his pajamas. Got who, Dad? Thomas knelt down to his son's level. The people who hurt you. The police arrested them. They can't hurt you anymore. Danny's eyes went wide. Grandpa? No, April said quickly. Not Grandpa. But there are some things we need to tell you about that night. When you're ready. I'm ready now, Danny said, his voice small but firm. So they told him. Everything. How Laverne and her sister had tricked Grandpa Ronald, made him believe Danny wasn't his real grandson. How they'd poisoned Grandpa's mind and body. How they'd made him do terrible things. Danny listened in silence, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and finally, understanding beyond his years. So Grandpa was sick, he asked. Like, in his brain? Yes, Thomas said carefully. He was being poisoned, and he was being lied to. But Danny, that doesn't make what he did okay. He still chose to hurt you, even if he was confused. Will he go to jail? Maybe. That's up to the courts to decide. Danny thought about this for a long moment. Then, can I see him? April drew in a sharp breath. Honey, you don't have to. I want to, Danny said. I want to ask him why he believed them instead of believing me. Thomas and April exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. They'd thought Danny would be terrified of Ronald, would want nothing to do with him ever again. Are you sure? Thomas asked. Danny nodded. He's my grandpa. He taught me to fish. He used to read me stories. The boy's voice cracked. I want to know if he's sorry. Okay, Thomas said slowly. But on your terms. When you're ready, where you feel safe, with me and Mom right there with you. And he can't touch me or come close to me. Danny added, showing a self-protective instinct that broke Thomas's heart. His son had learned to fear his own grandfather. Absolutely. We'll make sure of it. Over the next few days, Thomas watched the news coverage with grim satisfaction. The arrest of Laverne and Marcia Silva was headline news. Sister Act of Terror, gold-digging duo accused of poisoning elderly husbands, read one headline. Black Widow sisters face murder charges, read another. Kirk's media contacts had done their work well. Every sordid detail was exposed. The previous dead husbands, the stolen millions, the falsified DNA test, the attempt to murder Ronald Silva, and, most damning, the abandonment of 9-year-old Danny McMillan on a frozen highway. Public opinion was vicious. The sisters' mugshots were everywhere, accompanied by commentary calling them monsters, sociopaths, evil incarnate. Death threats poured in. Their lawyers held a press conference claiming their clients were innocent, but nobody was buying it. The evidence was too overwhelming. On Monday, Thomas, April, and the team attended the arraignment. Laverne and Marcia were led into court in orange jumpsuits and chains, their faces haggard, their designer clothes replaced with prison wear. The judge read the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, 2 counts, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, child endangerment. The list went on and on. How do you plead? The judge asked. Not guilty. Both sisters said in unison, but their voices lacked conviction. Bail was set at $5 million each. Neither could make it. Their assets had been frozen pending investigation. As they were led away, Laverne's eyes found April in the courtroom. For just a moment, their gazes locked. Thomas saw pure hatred in Laverne's expression. The mask finally dropped. This was the real woman, cold, calculating, completely devoid of empathy. April stared back without flinching. Then she smiled. A small, satisfied smile that said everything. You lost. I won. You will never hurt my family again. Laverne looked away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Thomas had prepared a brief statement with Kemp's approval. My name is Thomas McMillan. On Christmas night, I found my 9-year-old son Danny wandering Highway 49, barefoot, bleeding, and hypothermic. He'd been abandoned there by his grandfather, who'd been manipulated by the 2 women you saw in that courtroom. Danny nearly died that night. He still has nightmares. He's terrified to leave our house. Thomas's voice was steady, controlled. These women destroyed my family for money. They poisoned an elderly man, turned him against his own daughter and grandson, and left a child to die. I want everyone to know what they did. I want everyone to understand that there are people in this world who will kill without conscience, who will hurt children without remorse, all for financial gain. And I want everyone to know that we will not let them get away with it. The statement went viral. By evening, it had been shared millions of times. Support poured in, not just for Danny and the McMillan family, but for all the victims of Laverne and Marcia's schemes. Families of the previous dead husbands came forward with their own suspicions, their own evidence. The case grew and grew, becoming one of the largest serial fraud investigations in state history. Kemp called Thomas a week later. We've got them cold. 3 of the previous husbands have been exhumed. All 3 show signs of arsenic poisoning, just like Ronald. That's 3 more murder charges. Combined with everything else, the sisters are looking at life without parole. What about Ronald? Thomas asked. He's cooperating fully. Testified before the grand jury, turned over more evidence, even agreed to a victim impact statement. Combined with the tox screen showing he was actively being poisoned at the time he abandoned Danny, I think we can get him a deal. Reckless endangerment, 5 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, restitution to your family, and a permanent restraining order. Thomas was silent for a moment. Part of him wanted Ronald to suffer more. But another part, the part that was tired of anger, tired of hate, recognized that vengeance had its limits. What does April think? Thomas asked. I already talked to her. She's okay with it, as long as Ronald never contacts Danny unless Danny initiates it. Then I can live with it too. 2 weeks after the arrests, Danny asked to see his grandfather. They arranged a supervised meeting at a family therapy office, with Thomas, April, and a child psychologist present. Ronald Silva arrived looking like a ghost. He'd lost 30 pounds. His hair had gone completely white. The poison was slowly clearing from his system, but the guilt, Thomas suspected, would never fade. Danny sat in a chair with Thomas and April flanking him protectively. Ronald sat across the room, separated by a table, his hands folded in his lap. Hi, Grandpa, Danny said quietly. Ronald's face crumpled. Hi, Danny. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Danny spoke. Did you really think I wasn't your grandson? Ronald's voice broke. For a little while, I did. Laverne showed me papers, tests, things that looked real. And I was sick. I know that now. I wasn't thinking clearly. But Danny, that's not an excuse. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted your mom. Instead, I believed lies and I hurt you. Why did you leave me on the highway? Ronald swallowed hard. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought. Laverne told me you needed to find your real family, that it would be better for you. I was so confused, so angry. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I was wrong. So wrong. I could have died, Danny said, his voice small. I know. Tears streamed down Ronald's face. I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me, Danny. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Sorrier than I've ever been about anything. Danny looked at his grandfather for a long moment. Then he turned to Thomas. Dad, is Grandpa going to get better? The doctors say yes, Thomas said carefully. His body is getting rid of the poison. His mind is clearing. But he'll need a lot of help. Danny nodded slowly. Then, surprising everyone, he stood and walked around the table. He stopped a few feet from Ronald, just out of arm's reach. I forgive you, Grandpa, Danny said. But I'm still scared of you. Ronald nodded, not reaching for the boy. That's okay. That's more than I deserve. Maybe someday I won't be scared anymore, Danny continued. But right now, I don't want to see you. Is that okay? That's more than okay, Ronald said, his voice shaking. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. But I won't push. I promise. Danny nodded and returned to Thomas's side. The meeting ended shortly after, with Ronald leaving first so Danny wouldn't have to watch him go. In the car on the way home, Danny was quiet. Finally, he spoke. Dad, am I a bad person for forgiving him? Thomas pulled over, turned in his seat, and looked his son in the eye. No, Danny, you're an incredibly good person. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or saying it was okay. It means you're choosing not to let the anger poison you the way Laverne poisoned your grandfather. I'm still mad at him, Danny admitted. You can be mad and forgiving at the same time, April said from the passenger seat. Feelings are complicated. Danny thought about this. Will Laverne and Marcia go to jail forever? Yes, Thomas said firmly. They will. Good. Danny's voice was hard, older than his years. They're bad people. They hurt us. They should be punished. And they were. 3 months later, after a trial that captivated the nation, Laverne and Marcia Silva were convicted on multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and child endangerment. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The judge sentenced each of them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thomas and April attended every day of the trial. They heard Ronald's testimony, heard him describe how the sisters had systematically poisoned his mind and body. They heard Hugo Doherty explain how he'd falsified the DNA test. They heard other victims describe losing their fathers, their husbands, their loved ones to these women. And they watched as the sisters were led away in chains, their carefully constructed empire of lies crumbling to dust. On the courthouse steps after the verdict, Thomas gave one final statement. Justice has been served. My family can finally begin to heal. To everyone else out there who might be targeted by people like this, be vigilant. Protect your loved ones. And never, Ever let someone manipulate you into turning against your own family? 6 months later, Thomas stood in his backyard, watching Danny play with his friends. The boys' laughter rang out clear and bright, the nightmares finally fading. He still had scars, emotional ones that might never fully heal, but he was resilient. Kids were resilient. April came out with lemonade, settling into the chair beside him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son run and play, finally acting like a 9-year-old again. Ronald called yesterday, April said quietly. He's completed his probation requirements. Wanted to know if Danny might be ready to see him. What did you say? That I'd ask Danny. Let him decide. Thomas nodded. That's fair. He's also started a foundation, April continued, for families affected by financial fraud and elder abuse. He's donated $2 million to get it running. Still trying to make amends. I think he'll spend the rest of his life trying. April took Thomas's hand. Do you think we'll ever fully forgive him? Thomas considered the question. I don't know. Maybe. He was manipulated, poisoned, lied to. But he still made choices that nearly killed our son. Some things don't wash away easily. But we're healing, April said. That's what matters. Thomas squeezed her hand. Yeah, we are. Gordon, Matt, Travis, and Kirk came over that evening for a barbecue. The 5 men stood around the grill, beers in hand, talking about nothing and everything. You ever hear from the sisters? Matt asked. No, but I heard they're having a rough time in prison, Thomas said with satisfaction. Turns out inmates don't like people who hurt kids. Good, Gordon said simply. What about you? Travis asked Thomas. How are you doing with all this? Thomas flipped a burger, thinking. I'm angry still. Probably always will be, on some level. But we got them. They paid for what they did. And Danny's getting better. That's what matters. The boy's tough, Kirk observed, watching Danny tackle one of his friends in a game of backyard football. Takes after his old man. He's tougher than me, Thomas said quietly. I don't know if I could have forgiven the way he did. Maybe that's the point, Matt said. He's teaching us something. They stood in silence, watching the kids play as the sun set in brilliant oranges and reds. Thomas thought about Christmas night, about finding his son bleeding and broken on that highway, about the rage that had consumed him, the need for vengeance. He'd gotten his vengeance. Laverne and Marcia would die in prison. Ronald would live with his guilt forever. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. But more than that, his family had survived. They'd been tested, pushed to the breaking point, and they'd held together. That was the real victory. Danny ran up, breathless and grinning. Dad, Uncle Gordy says he'll teach me how to fish next weekend. Can we go? Thomas smiled at his son, his real son, blood be damned. Absolutely. We'll make a day of it. As Danny ran back to his friends, Thomas raised his beer. To family. His brothers raised theirs in return. To family. And in that moment, standing in his backyard surrounded by the people who mattered most, Thomas McMillan felt something he hadn't felt since that awful Christmas night. Peace. A year later, Thomas received a letter. It was from Ronald, written in shaky handwriting. Thomas, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, or April, or Danny. I know the pain I caused is unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. The foundation is thriving. We've helped over 200 families this year, providing legal support, counseling, and financial assistance to victims of fraud. I've also been volunteering at the Veterans Center where you used to work, trying to give back, trying to help others the way I failed to help my own family. It doesn't erase what I did. Nothing can. But maybe it can prevent someone else from making the same mistakes. Danny sent me a drawing last week. A picture of us fishing. He wrote at the bottom, maybe next summer. I cried when I got it. The idea that he might someday, somehow, forgive me enough to spend time together. It's more than I deserve. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even know if I want it, because what I did was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that every day, I work to honor the second chance your family gave me by not pressing for the maximum sentence. Every day, I try to be the man my daughter thought I was, the grandfather my grandson needed. Thank you for saving my life, even though I tried to destroy yours. Thank you for being the father I should have been. And thank you for raising a son who has more compassion and strength than most adults will ever possess. With deep regret and humble gratitude, Ronald Silva. Thomas read the letter twice, then showed it to April. They sat together in the evening quiet, processing. What do you think? April asked. I think he means it, Thomas Thomas said slowly. I think he's genuinely trying to change. Does that matter? I don't know. Maybe. Thomas folded the letter carefully. What matters is that Danny's happy. He's healing. And if seeing Ronald helps him heal, then I can live with that. Even though you're still angry? I'll probably always be a little angry, Thomas admitted. But I'm learning that anger doesn't have to define me. Danny taught me that. April leaned against him. Our son is pretty amazing. He is. He really is. That summer, Danny did go fishing with his grandfather. Thomas and April went too, staying close, watchful. But Ronald kept his promise. He never overstepped, never pushed, never tried to claim more than Danny was willing to give. They caught 3 fish. Danny laughed when Ronald got his line tangled in a tree. Ronald showed Danny how to bait a hook without squirming. For a few hours, they were just a grandfather and grandson, fishing on a sunny afternoon. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. And as Thomas watched his son smile, really, genuinely smile, he realized that maybe that was enough. Maybe healing wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. Maybe it was about choosing to move forward despite the scars, finding moments of joy and connection even in the aftermath of trauma. Danny had been broken that Christmas night. They'd all been broken, but they were learning to put the pieces back together. And that, Thomas thought, was the best revenge of all. Not destruction or punishment or hate, but rebuilding, healing, proving that love was stronger than manipulation, that family was more than blood, that even in the darkest moments, there was still light. Laverne and Marcia had tried to destroy them. They'd failed. The Macmillan family was still standing, still together, still fighting, and they always would be. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.